Before we open ePrime, let's talk about objects, the building blocks of your experiment. ePrime uses an object-oriented programming language, which means that you create objects and make the objects do things. Let's take a look at an object that you probably have on your desk right now, a jar of Nutella. A jar of Nutella has certain properties. It's brown, jar-shaped, and full of nutrients. Imagine that we could change these properties. For example, that we could change the color from brown to purple. Furthermore, imagine that we could have the jar do things, such as open up on its own. This action is called a method. In ePrime, we'll be arranging objects in certain ways and then changing their properties and methods until we have an experiment. Now let's take a look at the ePrime Studio environment. When you first open ePrime, you see that it's divided into separate windows. This window over here is the structure window. This window shows the project unfolding linearly over time. The experiment starts at the top and ends at the bottom. If you double-click on the Session Proc object, you will see a new window open up in the Workspace window. This new window is the Procedural Timeline. Objects can be dragged from the Toolbox window and dropped onto the Procedural Timeline. Other objects can be placed either to the left or to the right of an object already on the Procedural Timeline, causing them to occur either before or after that object. Alternatively, you can place an object above or below another object in the Structure window. In either case, both the Structure window and the Procedural Timeline are updated to show the changes you made. To see more options about the objects, right-click on the object, either in the Structural window or on the Procedural Timeline. For example, you can rename an object. Let's rename this one Welcome. Or you can delete an object. Let's delete this one. Notice that deleting an object puts it in the folder Unreferenced eObjects. This means that it won't be shown when you run the experiment. If you decide you want the object back, you can drag it from the unreferenced folder and drop it back on the Procedural Timeline. If, on the other hand, you want to annihilate it, first delete it from the timeline, and then delete it from the unreferenced eObjects folder. Just like objects in the real world, these objects have different properties. To illustrate this, double-click on the Welcome object and type Welcome to the experiment. You can see the properties of this object by clicking on the Property Pages button. For example, a text display object has properties such as font size, font type, and duration of how long the object is displayed. You, the designer, can change these properties. Experiment with changing other properties, hitting Apply, and then seeing what changes. Drag and drop other objects onto the timeline, double-click on them, and see what their properties are. You will find that you use some objects more than others, but it is useful to see the commonalities among them. I hope you enjoyed this video and that you now have a better understanding of objects and their properties. In the next video, we will learn about procedures and lists, objects that we will use for making an experiment. See you soon.